Michael, I want to get your take on how we started the day today with the judge ruling that Trump was in contempt of court for the 10th time, connected to violating the gag order. And while he threatened jail, while he has mentioned the possibility of jail time before, since he didn't believe that $1,000 would actually make a difference to Donald Trump, today we seem to see him make the most serious threat yet. I just want your read on the judge's posturing today, and whether you think it actually is a real possibility that Donald Trump gets put behind bars here.
So what the judge did today was very smart, I think. There were 3 possible contempt charges, one with respect to comments about Michael Cohen, one with respect to David Pecker, and one with respect to the jury. He only found him in contempt with respect to the jury, saying in a sense, the other 2 are more or less fair game. But he said to him, look, enough's enough, and if this persists, I'm going to have to do something that is going to catch your attention, and that is the possibility of jail. Now, he recognizes that going to a federal prison or a state prison would be very problematic. But each courthouse that I've ever practiced in has a lockup, essentially a jail cell behind the courtroom, which is where they hold people who come from jails and then have to testify in the courtroom so that they don't escape. The judge could say, you know what, I'm stepping you back, putting you in that cell. You'll sit there for an hour and get a sense of what this will continue to be for you if you don't honor my order. So there's a possible interim step that can take place, a timeout, if you will, to think about it in this back jail cell. And we'll see if Trump really gets the message.
I want to bring in CNN legal analyst Norm Eisen, who's been in court and is here with me now. He's the former House Judiciary Special Counsel in Trump's first impeachment trial and has litigated cases against Trump previously, also former White House ethics czar. Norm, all right, you and I were talking beforehand. Really interesting day over the course of it. We were kind of wondering how the judge would fare on these new 4 alleged gag order violations. We saw him hone in on one. What was your reaction to him sort of drawing the line and saying, look, at this point, the next time you do this, it is going to be jail?
Omar, in a trial that has had more than its share of dramatic moments already, we're only about a third of the way through. This was perhaps the most intense confrontation that we've seen yet. Donald Trump has very persistently violated this gag order. There's only $1,000 per violation that the judge can fine him. He warned when he found the first 9 violations that he would up the ante. Today he found a 10th violation, and he told Trump, if you keep this up, you are going to force me to put you in jail, as difficult as that will be for the trial, for the personnel, and for the country.
Yeah, and that was just how the day started today, because then we've been hearing testimony from Jeffrey McConney, the former longtime controller at the Trump Organization, and the way we've sort of been listening to it and sort of framing it in discussions is there's exciting testimony, there's not so exciting testimony, but still important testimony. And as McConney's been going through some of the specifics of the financial relationships between Cohen, the Trump Organization, Trump himself coming from his personal account, what is your read on the testimony that we've seen so far from McConney?
Well, after the intensity of the judge's confrontation with Trump and the look that Trump gave the judge, it was intense on both sides. It was that identical look as you saw in his mugshot, Omar. After that, we settled into an extremely important but very mundane part of the case. And that is, this is, after all, a prosecution for 34 false business records. Now, to be felonies, there has to be an intent to cover up another crime. The entire trial so far, the first 2 weeks of testimony, have focused on the other crime, the alleged election interference crimes under federal and state law. Today, Jeffrey McConney, accounting professional, took us through the accounting crimes. It was mundane, it was ordinary, it was low-key, but I was watching the jury, and the jury was paying very close attention. The prosecution kind of gave them their dessert first, and now it's the vegetables. But the jury is focused on that. And of course, that's critically important because you've got to have the jury following the trail of breadcrumbs on these 34 alleged false documents.
And we've seen over the course of today, the jury has been following some of the documents that have been presented on screens that they've had, to your point, keeping up with what's been presented in court. But you also brought up something really interesting because, look, it's been billed as the hush money case in many circles, but it has to do with election interference. It has to do with the hush money that, of course, we've been talking about, but also with what the charges are center on, which is the falsifying business records here. Do you see this as the transition into the falsifying business records, the alleged falsified business records portion of this case, or is this just sort of a tidbit here?
It's fascinating how they've chosen to do it. The answer is that they are now introducing the second main theme or part of the case, and we're going to see alternation between these two different parts of the case as we go forward. The alleged campaign and election and tax crimes, the tax crimes came up today too, that make the falsification a felony, plus the falsification itself. Without that part one, the drama of the hush money payments that the prosecution claims were campaign and election interference, sometimes they call them election fraud or illegal election influence, that's the allegation. Without that, these 34 documents that we heard about all morning would just be misdemeanors. Yeah. It's that intent to commit another crime.
Yeah.
You know, as you know, because we've talked about it, my view from the get-go has been it's a mistake to call it the hush money case. Hush money's not a crime. And the point of the hush money was, according to prosecutors, to interfere with illegally influence an election. That's really what they've been arguing. But today's document evidence, just as important to proof beyond a reasonable doubt, if they can get there.
100%. I also want to bring in Jeff Schwartz. He's a former Florida judge and law professor who joins me now. And Jeff, I'm curious from your perspective, I want to get your take on one of the things we heard from the witness today, Jeffrey McConney, is that these payments in many cases were coming from Donald Trump's personal account. And I'm curious to you, do you see that as significant?
It's very significant because the chances are that there's nothing coming out of his account that he isn't actually signing for himself and that he doesn't have knowledge of. As we all know, Mr. Trump has a reputation of being rather frugal, especially when he's not spending money on himself. So here, I think that because this is so important to him, there's no way money's coming out of his account that he doesn't know about.
And look, we've talked about it, even joked about in some cases that the testimony today is a little bit more mundane, but still very, very important. I want to go a little bit back to what some may have seen as exciting testimony when Hope Hicks was on the stand on Friday. What do you think the prosecution was able to get out of her, and what do you think the defense was able to get out of here? Because they did seem to score a few points in their direction during that testimony.
Well, the defense scored points in getting Hope Hicks to say that Michael Cohen ran off on his own, that he was rogue. He didn't do anything to fix something that he hadn't broken himself. Kind of it got into what his role was with the Trump organization and how important he was. But to the same extent, she gave them the flavor of what was going on inside the Trump organization as all of these different things were coming to light, things that were dangerous to his campaign, and how he was concentrating on his campaign, not on his family, and that it was all consuming during those last couple of weeks of the campaign. That's important because the key to this is that the purpose, that is the more substantial purpose of what they were doing, was to hide contributions they were making, in essence, to the campaign, and that they were hiding these payments to influence the campaign. And she gave them just a big shot of that on Friday.
Yeah, and she had that interesting perspective as being both the press secretary on the campaign, but of course the communications director once she was in the White House as well, where she, as she testified, had access to what she said were some reflections over the timing of when all this was going on. Norm, just before we go, you're about to head back into court right now as prosecutors re-entered the courtroom. We've been on a break to this point. What are you looking for in the remainder of McConney's testimony today?
I'll put on my defense lawyer hat because most of my career I was a defense lawyer. What we haven't yet heard from McConney, and I think where the defense is going to open when they get to cross-examine him is, did Donald Trump ever tell you that he was signing this check in order to make an illegal campaign contribution? No. Did Donald Trump ever talk to you about why he was signing this check? No. Were you there when Donald Trump and Michael Cohen supposedly discussed these payments? No. So the defense is going to hammer, as they did with Hope Hicks, at some of the gaps and the helpful information that they can elicit.